Welcome to my guide on how to use my translation project. My name is Hanai, also known as LL. First of all, I would like to apologize in advance for my spelling mistakes and stuttering which might occur. I will try my best to explain how this project is set up and what steps you need to take for a working client. Let's get this started. To use this project, you first need to clean Cairo full client. You can download from the following site, which is the nemo.arc.ws/downloads. If you go into this site, you have in the first part of the site the download links. Currently, they're only up to the latest one you can download is from 2022. But if you have access to their Cairo site directly and you want to look for a new one, go ahead and look for it. I usually hover over the texts of the sites and look for the link if it like register or download if it mentions some link in it in corner down below. But if you want to go with the default available, go ahead because we will update it later on anyway. Once you have downloaded and installed the Cairo client, we can start with the steps for the project. In my documentation site, which you find all of this in a written format, so I will only demonstrate the steps based on it. There are two ways to download the project, but first of all, let's go into the project installation, the main page for this documentation site, and here's the once you have downloaded the Cairo client, we can start with the steps for the project. In my documentation site, which can also find the link down below in the video description, all this in a written format, like you see here. So I will just demonstrate the steps based on it. Basically, there are two ways to download the whole project from the GitHub page. First version would be the zip format, which can be if you click on the code box here, button here and hit download zip. Then we do download the zip for it. So they're compressed pretty much. But the problem is, or the downside of it is every time I make an update, you will have to download the whole project again, every file there is, which is kind of waste of space and waste of time, in my opinion, but basically it's up to you. The more complicated or a step which require more steps would be cloning the project with either the app from GitHub itself, which is called GitHub Desktop, or if you use any other program which does the same, like I use TortoiseGit, which is also explained in here. But for the TortoiseGit, you need two apps. Of course, first of all, TortoiseGit itself, but for Git to work, you also need Git for Windows, which is linked in here. When both of those is installed, so basically what Git for Windows does is Git for Windows installs additional binaries which are required for Git to work. That's all you need to know. After you have installed the program of your choice, like GitHub and TortoiseGit or GitHub Desktop or anything else you find useful, or you find, we can go into the cloning the repository. I'm going to just move this over. Side this a bit so it's not too. Ignore every other file. This is not important. So that's just what I use. So I hit once the TortoiseGit, you have, if you make a right mouse click, you have some extra options to choose from, which are basically the section down here. Git clone. Then we select Git clone, basic, and then you type in pretty much. Where is it? Okay, let's do it differently. Otherwise, I'm gonna screw myself. So in the code button in here, you just copy this link to the clipboard, add to the clone, and insert that. But yeah, and then hit OK. And then in this folder, the project will be downloaded to. So once this is done, we can continue. Now the download is finished. Now let's next steps. Next step will be the programs you need to make your own client. For this, we go back to the NEMO site we download the full client from and scroll down a few times. Starting with this section, download.exe, you can download an unpacked client which required to make your own. If you try to make use of the client which came with the full Cairo client, then you will get into trouble because those are protected and you can't use them basically. So now, depending on what client you wanna use, you have to select the client date, which will look like this. I'm gonna go with the 2024 this one, 2022 April version. It will as example. Then we get to this side, and then basically you have your multiple methods to choose from. But all of these methods require Python 2. I'm not going to explain how that's done because first of all, many guides out there like I had to use to make this work, but normally it's just an installer, and you run it, and maybe you need to restart your computer because it installs some binaries like mentioned for you to make the command parameter work, basically, like described here. Like if you type this one in a command line, like a batch file or anything, you type this after installing Python 2, and then it will download a certain file, which I can explain now. I usually go with the method 1 since I'm on Windows and I like to run access. So I hit this one, the X one, but you can choose whatever you want to use anyway. Method 2 is just a Python script itself, which is included inbuilt in the exe version. So, but you can also do this. There might be also the possibility to run the Python file itself once you installed Python 2 or higher, of course, but this is one of the options you can choose. So this step would look like a bit like, then you have here this get file, downloaded the exe file, and you just hit it, and then it will mirror it pretty much. Once this file is downloaded, you can close this down, and then you have here the file downloaded. Like you can see, it's the 27th, 8 p.m. for me currently, time of recording. So, and it's downloaded. This is an unpacked file which you can now use with the follow-up programs which I'm gonna explain. So, but in the end, it's up to you what method you want to use. So let's continue. So now to actually make your own client, which has multiple terms for it, which are diffing, hexing, or maybe even called patching. To make so patching can also mean to update your Cairo for clients. So there are two programs you can use, which are either NEMO or WARP. If you want to download NEMO, you can also go from this site and choose repository, which will now redirect to the NEMO GitLab site. This site, like in GitHub, you can either download the zip version or any other version you want, or you can also clone it. That's basically up to you. In this case, it doesn't matter, but it's also if you want to update like fixes and stuff, you would have to download it again completely. So in the end, it's up to you what you want to use. The same goes for WARP. Same way, either download zip or clone it. The same way like we did with the project. So the next program you need is the GRF Editor. In my project site, there's also a link also for that. Either you download it from Airtina or from Hercules, wherever you're registered, if you're not in both, of course. I want to use both or one of each. So download that. Then we have the last two programs to go. Those are, let's say, kind of optional and be for later. So the first one would be the RSU Patcher. which is pretty much a very light patcher in comparison to the Cairo one. So that official patcher, so it's just this window, and it just already patches like Go and no other thing. It's the light version from it. So that's the easy explanation of it. But once you see it, you will know what I mean. So light patcher, small UI, done, and it does its job. Then next part, which is a bit more important, would be the row open setup. Basically, what this is with Ragnarok, full Ragnarok clients. Let's go. You have the official one, which is this one. You can't read this because, first of all, it's in Korean and some strings are broken. I mean, for me, it's the encoding of my operating system, which can't display them. But to counter that, open setup exists. Now let's start this one. Once it started, of course. Second shouldn't be take. So it looks pretty much like this. It also takes the language from your OS, so your main language. So it auto translates to anything it is, and you can now make your settings. That's also one thing you will have to do before starting your first client, because there's no Lua, no settings saved in the Lua engine. Pretty much, that's what it uses now. Before it was simple in the registry in older clients like 2015 and far older. Now it's in Lua files. So make sure before you run your first client, select your graphics card, there's a resolution, sound settings, and so on. Everything else is optional, and then hit apply and OK afterwards. So those are the last two programs which you need. Optional, you can also join my official my Discord, which is also mentioned in, first of all, in here on the links, or on the main on the GitHub page. You can see down here, join the row translation project Discord server. Just your typo, never mind, not matter of fact. And then you have on here, you have here the information channel where you can scroll through, and there are many useful links. First of all, the important links for the project, and as for useful links like the GRF Editor, the NEMO homepage, GitLab page, WARP. That's their Artina post about it, explaining it. Then the official full clients, so the NEMO site, which we're on this one. And so this one. And of course, some other useful stuff like the RSU Patcher and the opensetup Patcher program, not Patcher, sorry. And of course, other stuff related to the project. But that's what you can find in there. And feel free to look through and join and leave as you like. There's no punishment or whatsoever. Just follow the rules I set up, and you're fine. So then, once everything is downloaded and ready, we finished the required preparations. So now let's make your first client. For this example, I will go with the 2022 April 6th client, like demonstrated before or already. So once you have downloaded this, the exe, of course, like we did with this one, with the get file. We select it in, I'm going to do both NEMO and WARP afterwards, so don't worry. It will generate this output path, the patched output, sorry. Of course, I will going to change it to my own one. So you see, I have here my folder, and then I will go into this and select. Okay, I'm not going to name it this right now. I forgot I don't have a. I do have one there. Here, never mind. So then you change the outpatch, but since you can't see anything, you will need to hit load client, so it'll injects the client into the program, which might take a while to load, depending on the client and your resources, pretty much. But it's pretty fast, I guess, in my opinion. So the next thing would be, since this project hosts multiple change files in the system folder, like head to example, let's go to the folder we downloaded, the project, like in the system folder or system EN folder now. We need to tell the client to read that folder instant with the adjusted file names. Like recommend request is not default file. So a default file would be something like, one second, would be like ongoing, where is it? Yeah, ongoing quest info true info list underscore true. That's an official file. But since we use a custom folder and custom file names, we need to tell the client to read it, to read the translation files instead. For this, I have true files in place for NEMO. I have in the project folder, which we don't have, this is this one. Under add-ons, we have, why is this, sorry, the NEMO, the folder called NEMO profiles. Now you see only 3 log files. Basically what those do are they pre-apply or pre-select patches and define the values you need for you. So you don't have to write anything yourself. The profile select the patches and you just have to click OK in NEMO at least. In WARP, you don't have to press OK anything. They will apply it, and also they will be selected, and you're pretty much done. No confirmation or anything. I will show that later. So in this case, since the dates in regarding it, so like we're using a 2022 client, we base a selected 2019 client. Like mentioned, those log patches only affect the system folder. And depending on what file was changed or added with each with those clients, so like in 2019 June clients, a new system file was implemented, which is the MapInfo file, which displays the when you change map, will be a nice texture in the middle of your screen showcasing where you are right now. And this MapInfo file is responsible for it. So since there's no other file afterwards from this point on for system folder based, of course, there will be not a new, there's nothing else to choose from. So I will lock this now. Then we can see here selected patches. Once there's the first confirmations and inputs to choose, first I will go by the default after the client is working and everything is running without issues. You can now and then go back to customization. But first, I recommend to choose defaults, like I do here right now in this example. Like the default DATA.ini, I will just hit OK. Then now this will be the new ItemInfo. We use a different folder, so we have to replace that pretty much. So just hit OK on those kind of patches. These are the system folder patches. Just click OK. Don't change anything. Don't even change or add .lop or lure on the end. It doesn't work for those patches, for the quest patches. So like in here, same thing. Don't add any .loop because yeah, it's not gonna work. So in here, this file is the one I'm talked about for the 2019 clients and higher. Just hit OK. Every error or warning which will pop up, ignore. That means that the patch which it tried to apply or select does not work for the selected client, but it does not mean the client is not working properly. Well, to some degree, it's not working. So if there's a patch you wanted, but it doesn't work, you can report it to NEMO on the GitLab issues page or on the Discord and wait for fixes. But depending on how much work it is, whatever, it's up to Andrew and so on to fix that. But don't worry, they still work, the clients. So once everything is selected and nothing is happening anymore, the next step would be to select the recommended patches. Like you can see here, we have a lot of recommended patches which were not applied. Some were, somewhere not. So always, if you use a profile from my side, select recommended, and again, ignore those warnings. We can't do anything about them. Like cancel the login window patch is not has failed, so it's not available. That one is also, so those are the recommended patches. A few didn't work. That's all you need. There's nothing else you need for a working client. Once this is done, you can now hit apply selected. Means it will write the client with the new patches. Which I'm gonna do for, of course, for demonstration. It's the same client I use in here. So in the end, this is all you need to do. For WARP, which looks like this. I already pre-selected the patch. I also will choose the ROTP client, and then let's select this one. Also replace, yes. And here's also some. There's pretty much the same steps, like load source. So it will load the client into it. It will load the scripts and the source X and extensions and whatsoever is customized to it. Then here in the upper left corner, we have the option to load a session file. So for WARP, it's session files, while for NEMO, it's profiles. Pretty much the same meaning. In the same folder, we downloaded just add-ons, but in WARP sessions, you do the same, pretty much. Select patches, it's already done. Pre-selected, no input required. Unless you want to change it, then you have to look it up, of course, but it's for later, once you confirmed your client is working. Like I'm gonna confirm for you right now, the lab files, not every customize was changed, so path, loop path, because a few files are optional. I forgot to mention it in NEMO, but it's the same for both. But if you select them, the paths are already predefined. That's I figured out a little bit later that it's still possible. So if you hit that, the paths are already in there, so you don't have to do anything else. So the same thing goes with here. Select recommended. You can now, I'm not sure why this is recommended, but it doesn't matter. The name of the title, window title. So that and pretty much that's all. So and then you can do the same. Apply patches. So written target Excel. So this client is now written with WARP. So also do me a favor, if you see these kind of patches or this kind of patch in WARP, don't use them. Not because they're not working, but they're different, and I will explain that later a bit once we go into it. But you can also watch my third video, which already exists, explaining the add-ons folder, which the custom Lua support is explained. That's what this patch is for. You can also see it in add-ons, custom Lua support, like you see here, the WARP version. A bit down below is the NEMO version, which are those patches. So if you don't know what it is or what it does, please don't use it. So now after we created our first client, we can continue. Once your client is generated, we can continue. First of all, of course, you need to place your newly made client into your folder, like the row folder, which we downloaded before. So the full Cairo client. And then we can go into the client folder itself. For this, I also have something neat done. In the project folder, under tools, various batch files, which are .bat. So that's a batch file. For this, we will start the client generator batch. I will briefly explain the other two and what they do. But the most important one is the client generator. If you start this one, you get this small window. I hope you can read it. In this case, you can go into it afterwards. It's all explained what to do and what it does. So first of all, welcome to the client generator. This will help you to copy over the files you want and need based on the choice you make. Also, every time after you come to change, any existing client folder, which will be generated in the same folder, will be deleted without asking. Don't worry about that, that's intended to have a really fresh client folder. So basically, once you made your choices, in this folder, there will appear a client folder, which will be which you will use. So ready to use for you, pretty much. So first of all, let's generate our client folder. So hit any key, then select the server mode. Like on default, DATA.ini is renewal. I will go with renewal by default because it's a renewal translation project, but you can also select pre-renewal. So let's go with this one. Then you have a selection of choices to do. Science. So the project's base version is 2015 October 29th. Since we are using a far newer client, like in this example, in 2022, April 6th, we will choose number 11, hit enter, and then it will tell you, do you want to proceed? Is this correct? With Y, so yes. Then it will copy all the files from, depending on the choice from the folder, from the translation folder, based on your input. Like it takes the base renewal folder, which if you scroll far up, you can see here, the renewal folder is the base folder pretty much. And then for compatibility reasons, it will now also copy files depending on the client required. Like you see here, 2017, the Lapin boxes were implemented. And some Rolex system changes and so on. This will go on until you fit the date you want. So it will start with this folder and then it will go down to this folder. This is the last one, which will be copied over. So once this is done, you just hit any key again to close it. And in your tools folder, like mentioned, is a client folder. This entails now the files you need. First of all, the data folder with all the files, and the system EN folder with the required files. I will go into detail a bit later. Just let's get the basics set up. So now it's up to you to decide what you want to use. By default, if you for development process, I would even recommend using the data folder itself as it is, but for this you have to open NEMO again and repatch your client with the read data folder first patch or WARP, of course. Of course, once you have some customization done, you can also use the same feature, save profile or load profile, like I did with this one, so you don't have to remember what patches you used. So now that I have run down the whole patches, pretty easy in this case, I will look for data folder and select it. It's not recommended by default. So if I apply this one, it now reads the data folder. So this one, once it is in your Ragnarok folder, where your Cairo client is. So in there, but for public use, of course, it's better to use a GRF. First of all, it's GRF is nothing else like a RAR or zip file, so it's an archive pretty much. For this one, we download the GRF Editor. Once you have installed it, you open it, and you will see this kind of window. Now we just take this data folder. Only the data folder, everything else have to be placed in the same folder as your client, which like this one, and move this in here. So now everything is in here. Blue means it's not saved at all. We also still need to decide on the name of the GRF file, but in the end, it will save you trouble pretty much, sharing trouble pretty much. Like if I hit now save or control S, I will now save this as example as server.grf. Of course, you can name it as ever you want, as you like, and hit save. And once this bar up here is done on 100%, we can go further, which takes a few seconds by channel, depending on the size, amount of files, of course. So now you see the files all are white. You can also click on them and you see the content of it. Except of course map files, but it's different matter. What is also important is here the client info and the client info. Depending on the client yours is based on, it reads by default different client infos. As example, the RAC.exe, pretty much RAC.exe clients read clientinfo.xml. If you go back a bit, there are also RAC.exe, which are the structurized clients, so that from the official test server, which does not exist anymore. You might even see in a few setups there's R.grf, like in mine. If I go into it real quick, the R.grf is the GRF the test server used. So you might not even see them anymore because they're only 300 megabytes, the last ones, and it was last updated 2020. So you can guess how old this is not used anymore. So if you see our data but you don't have it, remove that entry as example. It's not available anymore. It doesn't even matter anymore, so you can remove that just fine. So like mentioned there, but there's also, I believe, one client which is I think an Xerri client. I can't remember which one, but it reads the S client without being named after it. Like mentioned, I can't remember it. It was last, I think it was 2021 client. Might even have been one of those two. I think it was the 17 one or the 03 I believe. So in the end, so depending on which client you have, it reads a different as client or client info by itself. Of course, you can patch change that. Load custom with the patch load custom client info file. You can also see what it reads in this case. So, and then change the input, of course, and then of course rename the file to it. I could make one rename it to server.xml and apply the patch for it, and it reads this one no matter what. So in here, I mean the setup is also available or the in RTina wiki with additional parameters available, but this is a default setup and works with your local server. So the one which you might or should have at the beginning on your own PC to learn about RTina and Hercules itself. Once you have gathered enough knowledge and a bit experimentation, customization done, you can then go into make a public one. But it's always to have a local server for testing purposes. That's my opinion. But in the end, it's up to you. Once you have your GRF, the next step would be to open the DATA.ini, which is not included by default in the project itself. Well, otherwise you have to make your own Data.ini pretty much and have this one as default pretty much. I also have something like this in the project installation. You can just copy it as you like, name it, and pretty much done. Like in here, you see the example of the error data. I would have to remove that since it's not valid anymore, but it's up to you. It reads by a certain priority. 0 is being the highest priority, and the lowest number is always the lowest priority. I think it reads up to 10 GRFs, so no matter, you can decide how many GRFs you want to use. There are multiple servers I saw so far which use a separate GRF for their palettes, so their styles, hairstyles, and so on. because there's so many files in there regarding palettes that it's to patch with that every time. So I have that in one. Yeah, but it's up to you. And just add the palette GRF in case you want to use the two in the DATA.ini and you're set. Every file which is missing the current GRF, try to read from the next GRF in order. If it doesn't exist button here, it will go into the next GRF and so on. If it can't find it, you will error. Pretty much. That's pretty much the gist of it. Once you have done those decisions, like if you want to use the data for the version or the GRF version, we can then try the client we made. And I will now start it. Of course, I failed somewhere. Oh, now it should work. No, it doesn't, because I'm stupid. I forgot to change something. Got to do this. I have to check now if I made that same, or if I made a failure in the patch. Because then I would have to make this video. No, I'm not going to remake it. I'm just leave this in and you can see how I failed myself. So now that error is gone. So that low error was it couldn't find the file because I failed at the extension. Now, well, later. So now the client is working. Also, if you're wondering about the font, so the size of the text, that is linked to the lang type pretty much. Like if I go in here, I'm not going to use the server GRF right now, but I have a custom one here, which is also pretty much the same. Just head in there. Then since this client reads the lang, the clientinfo.xml, I will change here lang type 1, save in there, and it should be done. So this time when I start this client, no, I screwed it. Oh yeah, save. I should save the file itself and then save. One missing step. So let's repeat this. Now you see the font changed and so on. You can read it better. So 0 is the Korean version or Korean font used, and 1 is the American, so the USA one, which maybe most of you are used to, or I am at least. So, but since we're using the default one, I'm going to change that back, save the file directly, and then save the GRF. So now it's reverted. So then, that's pretty much all you need to know. And then you can try starting your client. If nothing pops up, you've no error or warnings, whatever, then nothing happened, no issue at all. That means on the startup, and that still can mean there's some issues in game, pretty much. So, but that's something for later, and once we finish this, guys, pretty much. So this will be a cut slightly or long after the first recording session, which was kind of corrupted for some reason during the ending or finishing up the process itself. So there might be a slight change in the layout and position of certain windows. So be aware of that. But so I will go over the item info part pretty much. So the last part would be the explanation about the modified item info and its layout. For this, I will base it on, like usual, on the document side. Since then, also the document side layout changed a bit. So what you're looking for or will be looking for is the multi-item info support in additional guides. In here, we have a lot of text, of course, like usual, to explain the whole stuff. But visual is sometimes better, so I'm going to explain this one as well. So with the pull request 67 back in whenever I can remember, I implemented a NeoMind's multi-info support into the project. So first of all, the system, the item info Lua file in the system.in folder, previous it was the normal system folder, was the config file. Pretty much that's what it looks like in the official one, so the normal default one. I hope you don't mind the white background, and that's what I'm used to. So I will go over the whole settings, which are, like mentioned, or also explained on the document side. But in this case, I will go over some slight changes I didn't change on the document side yet. It's just not much. It's just a database links like Divine Bright, which are now in a table pretty much, or an array, if you want to call it. And you can have now multiple versions of it, depending on what the server is, or the item is from. Like if the item is from IRO, it takes the IRO one. If it's a custom item, it will link to this one, and so on. And Divine Bright is the default one. Of course, you can make your own entry with Rate My Server if you're using pre-renewal ItemInfo as example, and you can exchange it with Rate My Server. So anyway, let's go into the details or the functionality of it. So importing files is pretty much done via the do file command, Lua command. This reads a file from the disk. Like an example, first of all, I have here require. Require is the most important part and loads the function, which I split from the item info, from the original item info, for allowing me to have one item info for all clients. Because the only reason why that was separate were the whole arguments about costume and effect ID, which were causing issues with older clients' arguments were not available. So the do file from the item info, this is the translation file, like it used to be the item info _en in the system folder. Now it's separately in Lua files 514 item info Lua, be a bit apart. This multi-info support also allows you to load additional files like Cairo or whatever, but in Cairo version, prepare for Lua errors because it's not that great or it needs a really new client to process the new arguments or functions because in those Lua files is also the original function in there. So it's gonna get messy if you do that. It's just an example. And like mentioned, it's possible to load multiple Lua files now if you want to import. Like I provide official untranslated Lua files based on the server. But that's not all you have to do to make this possible. At the end, which I will go over when I'm there, will be explained further what this item info merge function is, this one. So the next part would be the in-game display. So then is the configs for this one. So the configs for the translation file basically is a display server. So to display the server where it's from based on the input, like you can disable it, you can put it in item name, top of description, or the bottom of the description, however you want. This will then be shown only in the item name directly. I mean, this I still have to change a bit because it doesn't suit the database stuff down here. So please note to that. But everything else is the same. Then the server color, so the color of it, how it's displayed, especially in the description or only in the description. And then we have the option to display the item ID, which is also either top description, bottom description, or disable it. The same for the database stuff, pretty much, like the item ID, either at the top or the bottom. I believe I put it. No, I think I only put it at the end, if I remember correctly. Anyway, so then of course the server name, the name of your server. So, and then here you have some images and further explanations what's meant by the whole arguments and configs to showcase them a bit further. And then we have the important item info merge function to import new tables, pretty much new files. So the best is if you don't touch this unless you know what you're doing, just change the lines down here. By default, I didn't enable any of those, especially the original item info. Don't do it, please, if you don't want to deal with Lua errors. So if you want to use custom items and override tables or override items, just remove the minuses in front, so the comment in front of those two entries. And if you want to use, like I did at the top with importing untranslated Lua files, yeah, I have here also an example how I did it. And of course, you have to do it the same way. So in the first argument is the table name, and here the false is true or false if it should override existing entries. That's only done via the override table currently by default, like you see here. Custom are not should post the override official names by default. If you want, you can change that, of course. And for the custom items itself, there's also a separate file, which is in the system en folder, ItemInfo _ c.lua, also custom. So there you also have a template, which is commented. And here down below is the table for custom items and for official overrides, like you see here. Then small explanation what these two files are, but that's all what I already did. And we're pretty much done already with the ItemInfo. Some side note is also if you're new and you don't know what a web service or web server does, it requires. Basically, the web service is responsible for your emblems and hotkeys and so on, which requires a client 2028 and higher, newer, I mean. Depending on what kind of, it's pretty easy to set up. You just have to open the service _ depending on lang type and patches and what's available, which is also listed down here and explained down here, especially here in the service folder section. You need this patch and so on. Another side note is since I changed the document side is the Sprite folder pretty much. This is the Sprite sheet based on Rate My Server, but worked on. So it also now includes the fourth jobs and so on. And I did some research on my own, basically. You can also, of course, download the whole file because this is Korean. And if you want to have the you need the NC comparison, then you can download here as the XD file, and then you can change the encoding as you like I did here already before. Let me just move this over here somehow. So, like you can see here, here's the NC version, and you can look at it. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope this video was, this guide was helpful in any way. Good update based on the first version. Thank you for watching and see you next time.